Thank you, Keegan, and thank you to the other organizers for inviting me to speak today. And thanks to you for being here. I'm going to start off with a quick story. It's a true story, and it takes place in England, in West Yorkshire to be exact, where Mr. Brian Mallinson works. And Mr. Mallinson came into his place of business one spring morning, and he was startled to find a newborn lamb curled up with her mother. Well, Mr. Mallinson and his colleagues became very attached to these animals, especially the little lamb whom they named Larry. And this scenario would be right at home in a children's story or a Disney movie, except that Mr. Mallinson works in a slaughterhouse, this slaughterhouse. And according to British law, no animal who enters a slaughterhouse, even an animal born there, is allowed to leave in one piece. Well, two pretty remarkable things happen next. The first is that Mr. Mallinson and his co-workers stood up for these animals. They began speaking to the media. They said things like, everything has a right to live. We thought it ridiculous that they had to be destroyed. And to kill them would have been wrong and unnecessary. Now, I think we can agree these are pretty extraordinary comments coming from people who kill animals for a living. Now, the second remarkable thing that happened is that they hired a lawyer at their own expense to fight for these animals, and they won. They won freedom for Larry and Larry's mother, who have gone on to live in a sanctuary for farmed animals. Now, what I love about this story is that it beautifully illustrates that anyone, even someone who works in a slaughterhouse, can advocate for animals. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we can advocate for animals, and I'm going to be talking about animal exploitation in general, maybe some things that you're not familiar with already. I'm not going to show any graphic images, and because of the time involved, I have about 45 minutes, I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail. So it's just going to be kind of an overview. And this is what we'll talk about. Animals used for food, animals used for entertainment, animals used for clothing, animals used for experimentation, animals in the wild. We'll talk a bit about what you can do to advocate for animals. I'm going to talk a bit about activist burnout and how you can avoid it. And we should have time for some Q&A. All right, we'll start with animals used for food. Animal agribusiness goes to a lot of expense to try to convince you that this is what a typical farm looks like. But of course, no farm looks like this, at least not in animal agribusiness, otherwise we'd be looking at a photograph, not an illustration. In neighboring Sonoma County recently, there was an egg producer who was marketing their eggs with cartons showing hens interacting with their chicks in the outdoors. And they were taken to court by the Animal Legal Defense Fund, and they had to change their marketing. This is the reality for most hens in this country who are used for egg production. They live about 2 years with 5 or 6 other birds in a battery cage, and this is a device about the size of a file cabinet drawer. And because of the tight confinement, these birds peck at one another, and so they're debeaked. The egg producers cut off the fronts of their beaks with a hot blade. On the left is a hen with a healthy beak. On the right is a hen who's undergone this debeaking process. This is very painful. It's done without any pain relief, and it makes it very difficult for the hen to eat or drink for the rest of her short life. Her job, in the eyes of the egg industry, is to churn out about 6 eggs a week for human production, for human consumption. And the male chicks are of no use to the egg industry, and so they are killed shortly after hatching. They're either ground up alive or they're thrown into bags and suffocated. This is what a typical farm for pigs looks like, pigs raised for meat. The females are artificially inseminated twice a year, and when she's pregnant, she's isolated in this restricted gestation crate. This gives you an idea of what that looks like, how confining it is. When she's about ready to give birth, she's moved to a farrowing crate, and you can see she has very little opportunity to interact with her babies. And the babies are taken away after 3 to 6 months to be killed, and these animals are fed antibiotics. Now, originally they did this because of the conditions in the factory farm, because it's so unhealthy and diseases flourish, but about 50, 60 years ago, factory farmers discovered that antibiotics promote growth, so they're given these antibiotics for growth and for health. Now, I want to point out that there's a lot of talk in the movement and by so-called pork producers about banning gestation crates, and a lot of them are moving away from gestation crates, but they're still using the farrowing crate. And you can see it's very, very restrictive. These are the sorts of conditions that cows raised for meat live in. Cows in factory farms are subjected to a variety of mutilations, including castration, branding, dehorning. They go in there with a caustic paste when the calves are young and they burn out the horns as they're growing, or sometimes they just cut them away. Again, this is all done without any painkiller. Animal advocates say, well, they don't feel any pain, they're not suffering. The reality is they just don't want to spend that extra money. This is what a typical dairy farm looks like. You can see how little room they have to move around there. The U.S. is the #1 producer of milk in the world. We as a country produce about 15% of the world's dairy milk. In 1950, there were about 22 million cows producing about 116 billion pounds of milk every year. Today, there are 9 million cows producing about 200 billion pounds of milk every year. So we've taken that population of cows, reduced them by more than half, and then we've almost doubled the milk production. And we've done this through selective breeding, those antibiotics I mentioned, and a bovine growth hormone that is banned in many countries. But there's more to this story, and that is that mother cows form lifelong bonds with their calves, but the dairy industry wants mother's milk for human consumption, even though nature intended that milk to go to her calf. And so the babies are taken away. The females go back into the dairy system, and the males are sold for meat, either in the veal industry, where they live a very, very short time, or sometimes in the beef industry, where they might live a little bit longer. So this is what activists mean when they say there's cruelty in every glass of cow's milk. Here we have a typical farm for chickens, raised for meat. And these are the land animal that we raise and kill the most for food. We kill about almost 10 billion land animals a year in this country for food, and about 95% of them are chickens. They're bred at hatcheries and they're raised in massive sheds, and by massive I mean roughly the size of a football field. They're fed antibiotics for growth and health. In the 1950s, it took about 84 days to raise a 5-pound chicken, 5 pounds being considered market weight. Does anybody know how many days it takes today? Yeah, about 42, 45 days, right? Thanks to selective breeding, growth-promoting hormones. The result are chickens who can't support their bodies. These are, at 45 days, these are babies. They're still chirping when they go to slaughter. They have baby legs, yet they have massive bodies, so they have congestive heart failure, they have leg splay, they have a variety of other problems. Also want to mention fishes. Fishes often get lost in our conversation about factory farming, but the reality is that fish farms now produce half of the world's fishes, and this number is only going to continue to increase as the fishing industry ruins the oceans, pulls marine life out. Diseases flourish in the tanks and nets that they use in these fish farms. So the fish are fed antibiotics. They're also fed other animals and even feathers. And fish do feel pain. There's been a lot of debate in recent decades whether or not fish are intelligent, whether they're sentient, whether they feel pain. There have been recent studies that show that they do in fact feel pain. Also want to touch here on the humane myth. Labels like free range and family raised and cage free are virtually meaningless. These are labels that marketing companies use to make consumers feel less guilty about consuming animals. And moreover, no matter how an animal is raised for meat, whether he or she was raised in a beautiful pasture and fed organic feed or grass, or whether they lived in a factory farm, they're all loaded up onto the same transport trucks. They're shipped for long distances, sometimes without food or water, and they all end up in the very same slaughterhouses as all other animals, and they all die these horrific deaths. Okay, animals used for entertainment. I'm going to focus my time on zoos, circuses, marine parks, and aquariums, and blood sports. So in zoos, animals are confined 100% of the time, and as a way of coping, they exhibit what are known as stereotypies. These are repetitive, abnormal behaviors that can include pacing, over-grooming, head bobbing, and zoos found out about 60 years ago that baby animals bring in customers. So they started breeding programs. And then they're faced with this issue of what happens when the babies get older, that they're stuck with all these adults. Well, a lot of zoos simply kill these animals. We see this a lot at the Copenhagen Zoo. We've seen giraffes, even chimpanzees being killed. They're also sold. They're sold to roadside zoos, to circuses, to biomedical research labs, and to hunting ranches where people pay to kill these animals in an enclosed space. And the lifespans are shortened in zoos. Elephants, for example, live about half the number of years as they do in the wild. As far as circuses go, animals in circuses spend about 91 to 99% of their time in confinement, that being the other time is performing. So they have some of the same stereotypies, problems. And animals don't grow up as natural performers. A bear doesn't grow up thinking, gee, I'd really love to ride a tricycle when I get older. So these animals are coerced into performing through using a variety of means, food deprivation, even physical abuse. All right, marine parks and aquariums. I'm going to focus just on whales and dolphins for the amount of time that I have. These animals are routinely captured in the wild, as we've seen recently in Taiji, which is the dolphin hunts that happen every year. These are highly intelligent social animals. They will swim for miles in the open ocean, so you can imagine what confinement is like for these animals. And they navigate their world with what we call echolocation. And so in a tank with absolutely no enrichment, the sonar just bounces off the tanks, bounces off the walls. And like animals in zoos, these animals are forced to breed and their babies are taken away. All right, I'm going to use orcas as an example here to talk about the effect of captivity on them, specifically in two areas. The first is the dorsal fin. Here we see a pod of healthy orcas. I believe this is in Puget Sound, and you can see their dorsal fins are very healthy. They're very straight. And this occurs in about 99% of orcas in the wild. Orcas in captivity, however, have collapsed dorsal fins. This is Tilikum. He lives in, and has for many years, in SeaWorld Orlando. He's also the subject of the film Blackfish. You can see his dorsal fin is completely collapsed. There's another view of him. This happens in more than 99% of orcas in captivity as well as many dolphins. The second example I want to talk about here is the health of their teeth. Here we have an orca in the wild. You can see her teeth are very intact and she's very healthy. But in captivity, orcas grow bored. Again, these are very large, intelligent animals. They have no enrichment. Often they're by themselves. And so they chew on the walls, cement walls. They chew on the floors. They chew on the metal grates between the tanks. And their teeth become cracked. And they can become infected, and this can lead to death, actually. And so marine park staff have trained these animals to open their mouths on command, and every day they go in with a hand drill, and they drill out the pulp, and then they flush it out, they irrigate it. And this is what you're seeing here. This is done without any painkiller. So you can imagine going to your dentist and having a teeth filled without any painkiller whatsoever. Now, this is another view of an orca who's missing pretty much all her front teeth. And of course, the marine park's attitude is, well, we're feeding them dead fish anyway, so it's not like she has to hunt. I'll spend just a couple minutes talking about blood sports, whether we're talking about bullfighting or dog fighting or bear baiting. Some animal advocates will even argue that horse racing and dog racing are blood sports, and I would agree. You know, these animals all end up dead. This is something that we definitely obviously want to avoid. Okay, animals used for clothing. I'm going to start off talking about wool because it's a product that a lot of us think of as benign, a lot of consumers anyway. But actually sheep are abused by workers. They're punched, they're kicked, they're stabbed in the face with shears. And then there's this practice called mulesing. You're going to be very grateful that I'm not showing images of this. This happens mostly in Australia, which is the #1 wool-producing country in the world. And they have an insect down there called the blowfly. And the blowfly likes to land her eggs on the backside of a sheep because there's a lot of hair back there. It's frequently matted with feces and urine. And when these eggs hatch, the larva eats away at the flesh, and this can also lead to death. So the wool producers simply slice off a section of the backside of the lamb, a huge chunk of flesh. This is done without any pain relief. And this scars over, and no wool, no hair grows there, and presumably it takes care of that problem. And if you think that sheep don't die in this industry, think again. You know, just like other animals abused and exploited for their bodies, the sheep become exhausted, their bodies become depleted, they stop producing as much wool as they once did, so they're considered spent. And they're shipped off from Australia on these giant cargo ships for weeks at a time to the Middle East, where they die in slaughterhouses, or they die in religious festivals, like the one we saw earlier in the week. It's about 6 million a year from Australia. And leather is probably the product that we're most familiar with when we're talking about animals used for their skin or for accessories and clothing. And we tend to think of cows mostly, but a lot of other animals, I've listed some of them here, a lot of other animals are used for their skin. Leather is not a byproduct of the meat industry. It is a co-product. Economists have run the numbers, they've looked at this, and they figured out that if it were not for the leather industry, the meat industry might not exist, at least not in the low prices that most consumers can afford. And also, many animals are still alive. Fur, you know, we thought 10, 20 years ago as activists that the fur industry was on its way out. But it really seems to be making a comeback. Most of the animals who die for fur are raised and killed in in fur ranches or fur farms. But many others are trapped in the wild, about 3 to 5 million in this country. And you know, when the fur industry puts out a trap, it doesn't just kill a fox or a rabbit. It kills indiscriminately. It kills the family dog, the family cat, bald eagles, And the fur industry just considers these animals trash. Okay, animals used for experimentation. I'm going to focus on three main types: animals used for biomedical research, for product testing, and for education. By education, probably the frogs and other small animals that some students are supposed to dissect in biology classes, the example we're most familiar with. So for biomedical research, animals are used as models of people to study human health, but animals don't get many of the diseases that humans do. And so despite the use of 115 million animals around the world every year, only about 25 new treatments are approved by the FDA. And this is including drugs. So, drugs tested on non-human animals are not necessarily safe and may go on to kill humans. In fact, 92% of the drugs that prove safe and effective in animals fail in clinical trials using humans. Cosmetics testing is another area. This practice is banned in more than 30 countries right now. There's no US law that requires companies to test beauty products on animals. I mean, shampoos, toothpastes, etc. There is a bill that's been introduced, I think, twice so far, called the Humane Cosmetics Act, that if it gets passed, would make cosmetics testing in this country illegal. Finally, education. Studies show that students experience stress and trauma during dissection exercises. This can result in an impaired ability to think and learn, and it may desensitize children. They may come to think of animals as objects. In California, we have a law in place that forces schools to offer a humane option to students K through 12. Many other states have this as well. They're allowed to opt out of dissection. All right, animals in the wild. I love this photo. It's just a happy photo. I'm just going to have time to offer a few sobering statistics. On average, 25 to 150 species of animals become extinct every day. We're now experiencing the worst period of species die-off since the loss of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. And 99% of currently threatened species are at risk because of human activities: habitat loss, climate change, hunting. I'm going to offer you three examples. So a century ago, there were about 100,000 tigers roaming Asia. Does anybody know how many tigers there are left today? 3,900. There are more tigers living in captivity in the United States than there are living in the wild. 5,000 in captivity in the US right now. Elephants. Elephants have been under siege for centuries for their tusks, and they recently reached a tipping point. There are now more elephants being killed for their tusks that are being born every year. So conservationists say that we could see the last of elephants in 20 years. And lastly, orangutans. They're under siege because they live in areas where we want to grow palm oil trees. So we're talking Malaysia and Indonesia. So they're being wiped out because of that. Okay, I know that's all pretty harsh. I know it's pretty bad news. So let's talk about some things that we can do. Some things that we can do to have an impact and not only help animals, but make ourselves feel better too. The first, go vegan. There's a great website that Food Empowerment Project has, foodspower.org, has a lot of great resources. Obviously, don't patronize businesses that keep animals in captivity. Don't wear animals. Avoid palm oil if you can. I know this is difficult. It's in about half the world's household products, but don't read those labels. Don't buy products tested on animals. Look for that Leaping Bunny logo. But we can step that up even more. So this is going to be kind of escalating a little bit. So speak up. Share information with family and friends. Ask elected officials to support pro-animal legislation like the Humane Cosmetics Act that I mentioned. You can even do more than that. You can get active. You can use your writing skills. Write letters to editors. Did you know every letter to the editor is important? Even if that letter doesn't get published, you're still educating that editorial staff because they know that your letter represents hundreds of letters that didn't get written, and you're educating them about that issue. You can write op-eds, you can write blogs, you can write magazine articles. You can volunteer or donate your time. There's just a few organizations that work to fight not only oppression against animals, but also human beings. You can volunteer at a local shelter. Every municipality, I think, has one. There's even shelters for specific animals like rabbits. Happens to be a special fondness of mine. These are all local. You can demonstrate. You can get out there and in public and talk to people or stand up in front of a business. Food Empowerment Project has a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration every month in Petaluma at a poultry slaughterhouse. And if you didn't come by the Food Empowerment Project table earlier today and get one of those little brochures about it, please stop by. Just one example. All right, now I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to talk about burnout. By a show of hands, how many in here consider yourself to be an animal advocate or activist? Wow, that's awesome, thank you. Thanks for what you do and thanks for being here. Burnout is an issue that we really don't talk about enough in this movement. We have this idea that we have to be stoic, we have to suck it up. The animals have it worse. And yeah, the animals might have it worse, but we're not going to help anybody by burning out. We all get into this movement to help animals with the very best intentions. But we often ignore our own health and happiness, and frequently we do not have the ability to cope with the trauma. And trauma comes from the Greek word for wound, and it can have a really harmful impact on our psyches. And that trauma does not have to happen to us directly. I'll give you some examples. Witnessing or investigating animal cruelty, working in a shelter, a series of non-traumatic stressful experiences, watching documentaries with violent content, even sharing a dinner table with someone who is eating animals. In addition to that, we all have lives outside the movement that demand our attention and add to the stress. So what is burnout? Well, it's a metaphor. It describes a state of exhaustion that is similar to wood succumbing to a fire. Its complement is another metaphor we use in the movement, recharging our batteries. A lot of us come to events like this one because we want to recharge our batteries. We want to feel inspired. We want to be around like-minded people. We don't want to have to worry if the food is vegan or not. Now, to those of us fighting on behalf of animals, burnout is often the result of prolonged exposure to suffering and injustice. It can feel a lot like depression. In fact, some say burnout is depression. But however you define it, a bad case of burnout can push you out of the movement altogether. So it's important we're able to recognize the symptoms of burnout before it sneaks up on us. The symptoms of burnout are really the symptoms of stress. Headaches, using drugs or alcohol, trouble sleeping, either oversleeping or insomnia, loss of appetite or overeating, fatigue, boredom, difficulty in relationships. Now, I'm not saying that if you suffer from one or more of these symptoms, you're burned out or even stressed out. What I'm saying is that we maintain an awareness about our physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual well-being, if you have a spiritual practice, so that we can be proactive about burnout. So I'm going to give you some suggestions for avoiding burnout. And these suggestions come not only from my own experience, but from the experiences of activists that I've interviewed for my first book. Now, these are in addition to the two most common things that we can all do, and that is get enough rest and eat properly. So the first is find a good fit. One of the best ways to avoid getting burned out is to match your style of campaigning with your strengths and your interests, thereby creating activism that is nourishing. Include achievable goals. So in addition to having long-term goals that might not reach fruition for years and years, have shorter-term goals that you can celebrate and acknowledge more frequently. Learn to say no. I know this is very difficult for compassionate people, but we need to watch ourselves, take care of ourselves, so learn some of these phrases. I can't this time. Sorry, not today. Thanks, but I've already got too much on my plate, and that won't work for me, but I'll get back to you if anything changes. All right, disconnect from technology. This is very difficult, I know, but I can't think of things that are much more depressing than reading the comments on Facebook. So try to make it a habit to spend, if you can, an hour a day off of social media, turn off your phone, stop watching the news. Equally important and associated with that, make time for yourself. Resist the temptation to turn every hobby and interest outside the movement into a way to help animals. And then make a change. This means that if you're doing everything you can to avoid getting burned out, and you still find yourself suffering grief, depression, frustration, anger, it might be time to just shift your focus. Okay, this isn't about giving up, it's simply having the courage to say what I'm doing now isn't working for me, it's probably not working for the animals, it's time to try something else. All right. My last set of suggestions is what I call the active approach. And I call it the active approach because it is a 6-step process, and each letter in the word active stands for one of the steps. So we begin with A. Allow yourself to be human. Hard as we try, we're not superheroes. We're not going to win every battle. So give yourself a break. Take a real vacation. Go out with friends. Try to have fun and not feel guilty. C is create something tangible to remind you of your victories. This could be a website, this could be a folder, it could be a scrapbook with articles of campaigns, successful campaigns that you've worked on, anything that you can turn to when you're feeling down to remind you you're fighting the good fight. T is talk to someone you trust. Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, best friend, teacher. Animal activism is an emotionally loaded endeavor. And it's important we're able to unburden ourselves. And if you don't have someone you can trust, talk to a therapist. I is ignore upsetting text and images. When you're feeling down, you're feeling that grief, it's not the time to watch some documentary with somebody filled with horrible, upsetting images, or read a book or a magazine that has images like that in it. V is visit an animal sanctuary. V can also be for volunteer at an animal sanctuary, like Jocelyn and her friend Lois here at Vine Sanctuary in Vermont. Like many of you, I've spent hundreds of hours in sanctuaries, and I am constantly amazed by how many activists have never rubbed a pig's belly, or whistled to a turkey to hear it roll back, or watched a hen take a dust bath. Get some face time with the faces you're working so hard to protect. And if you volunteer at a sanctuary, it's a great place to work up a sweat, which leads me to E, exercise. So run, walk, bike, hike, yoga, go to the beach and jump over towels. just something, don't underestimate the importance of exercise. All right, I have two written pieces that I wanted to recommend to you. The first is Aftershock by Patrice Jones, an activist many of you are probably familiar with. What you might not know is she was also a clinical psychologist. This is an incredible book, I can't recommend it enough. And then my own Striking at the Roots. I interviewed 120 activists around the world, and I have a whole chapter dedicated to burnout and how these people avoid getting burned out. And I want to leave you with a bit more hope here. I want to talk about activism for a moment of self-care. This is how we manifest a better, safer world. It's through activism we validate our life experiences, our trauma, and find healing. Through activism we sustain ourselves as we seek liberation for all. And finally, I love this quote from Audre Lorde. She's an awesome activist. She said, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. and that is an act of political warfare. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?